That was the greatest Christmas I've ever had.
I would say the same thing, but some repulsive soul sent me an eviction notice.
That was me.
Now, our first order of business would be to play Mario Party 2, unless you want to follow through on that eviction notice.
No worries. I'll just have to give him a rain check on this one.
You should throw some bribery in there too. It is the season of giving.
I bribed my probation officer the other day, and he gave me 120 hours of community service.
Isn't that a bad thing?
Not if you enjoy making the world a better place.
Well, in that case, I need the phone to make the arrangements. Where is it anyway?
Oh, it's in the kitchen right next to my copy of Mario Wonder.
If you would like to see some noise, the video games will not be in the kitchen.
Why do you keep Mario Wonder in your kitchen?
I feel like it complements many pasta dishes quite well.
Now, don't kill me on this one, but what is a Mario Wonder? What was that for?
Are you dead?
No.
Then I feel my reaction was justified.
What's so wrong about me not knowing what Mario Wonder is?
Nothing actually.
Okay, good, because it sounds simply awful.
I'd say the same thing about what would happen to you if you took those out.
You know, this reminds me of a story I used to tell my kids.
You don't have kids.
You're 17.
And I'm far too distracted by Wario World to focus on any meaningful relationship, but that's beside the point.
Then what is the point?
Well, it's either the financial burden of having children has grown to be very hard to handle within the past few years, or I just want to speak on my right to play as Yellow Yoshi.
As we all should.
Wait, why do you like Wonder so much?
My copy jumped in front of a bullet for me to save my life. I'll never forget the sacrifice it made that day.
With all the altercations out of the way, I will tell you a story. A story of a man named Evergeezer Stooge.
Hey, that name sounds familiar.
I don't feel too good.
Hark, the superstar Mario sings, glory to the newborn game, peace on a mushroom.
Oh.
Carolers. Every day now since October 20th of a bunch of snotty-nosed carolers been perusing my doorstep. And little known fact about me, I hate them. And the mort. They make the funeral market hard to get into. Everyone was raving about a game called Super Mario Bros. Wonder, which seems like it's trying to be a sequel to what the new Super Mario Bros. Titles were. But upon playing the first stage, it tries way too hard to reinvent the wheel. The traditional map structure is butchered, the areas make zero to little sense, and they removed all of the good power-ups and replaced them with ones that frankly make no sense at all. I just don't understand how anyone can stand this. This isn't the most wonderful game of the year. This is the worst overall game of the year. It's the worst overall game of the year. With the flowers all yelling and every stage bringing a new thing to fear. It's the worst overall game of the year. It's the replacement we didn't need. With its awfully bad gimmicks that cover its mimics of a game that I loved. It's the worst, stupidest game I have shoved. There'll be sorrow when playing, and that's not me saying that it would be good in that sense. There'll be nothing worthwhile as your friends play the bile that you gifted unto them all. It's the worst overall game of the year. There won't be a point to it, as there's no proof it didn't come from my rear. It's the worst overall game of the year. There'll be sorrow There'll be nothing worthwhile as your friends play the vial that you gifted unto them all. It's the worst overall game of the year. You could say they'll be dodging the complaints that I'm lodging, but let this be clear. It's the worst overall game. No, the worst overall game. Yes, the worst overall game of the year.
Wake yourself, Evergeezer. You wallow in your own demise, Mr. Stooge, for I have come to bear upon you the grave news of your untimely circumstances.
Who are you?
In life, I was your partner, New Super Mario Bros. Wii. In death, I am your shadow, a plague that has kept you tethered to this mortal desire of all things sterile and lifeless.
Well, why have you come to haunt me? I've done nothing wrong.
That fact is where you are sorely mistaken. The sorrow you have brought to those around you is a disease with no cure, except for the forgiveness that you have within yourself.
I'm too old for this.
Don't you dare snooze at my presence, Evergeezer. Do you not know what you have done to this plane? The lives you have made and will force to go through an eternal suffering? Your incompetence is the least of my...
Evergeezer Stooge,
What
I require you to wake
incarnation-
up this
Oh!
instant. Get up, you foolish young man.
Who you calling young, you darn whippersnapper?
The being who will help you see the insight you have lacked in a life as long as your own.
I knew my prescription was off. And I don't even know what you're talking about.
Taxes.
The season is upon us.
And Super Mario Bros. Wonder.
Oh, God!
I'm here to help you understand all that built up to what this game desired to be.
And allow me to introduce my most valued assistant, a boy by the name of... That's weird. It says...
Is he gone?
I'll carry out the message. GingerVHS, I'm so glad you could make it on such a tight schedule on Christmas Day.
Saw a ghost. This bucket list gets shorter by the day.
Poor Evergeezer doesn't seem to understand the true value of Super Mario Bros. Wonder. I was hoping perhaps you could teach him the value of its history?
Why does he look like me with makeup that looks like it was done in marker and bad faith?
This is what you too would resemble if you lost your love for Super Mario Bros. Wonder. A sad, lifeless husk of a man who I can only describe as someone nasty, irritating, and gross.
Hey! What's that supposed to mean? You can't make me listen to any of the risible that escapes his lips. Be as you are. What did he tell you? Super Mario, he's so cool, right? He has a hat, overalls, and a general disregard for the lives of his enemies. I have one of those things. Everyone knows him, or at the very least knows of him. I'm sure of it. He's the Mickey Mouse of not just Nintendo games, but video games as a whole. Unless you want to include the characters Stick, Stick-2, and Ball, because the census doesn't. It is insane how many spin-offs and side gigs the name of Mario has accumulated over the years, and this doesn't count. But taking away all of the countless spin-off series and franchises that birthed themselves out of Mario, because that makes for a very odd family tree, the core 2D mainline titles have always been where Nintendo puts their most effort and quality. Or at least that's what this note from 1994 says. Ever since the release of the Nintendo 64, nearly all of Mario's efforts were exerted into the third dimension. Super Mario 64, Super Mario Sunshine, Super Mario Galaxy, and Not You were all incredible games that invested so much life into the worlds, objectives, level design, style, or really anything they could get their hands on. And oh my goodness, these games were so much fun! fun! I spent so much of my childhood getting to understand and develop with these games that... Wait, am I forgetting something? Yeah, probably not. This was a very strange era for 2D Mario games, because ever since Super Mario Land 2 released for the Game Boy back in 1992, there had been no mainline 2D Mario games for quite some time. Instead, we got some of the greatest games of all time. Now, I have a conversation reserved for all of these games at a later time, even this one, but I'll say this at the very least. The Wario Land series was a great little distraction for the handhelds, while the 3D Mario games ran rampant. But I feel that was all they were ever destined to be. Aside from the people that grew up with these games, or the people like me who missed that demographic by a good 2 decades, you don't hear all too many people holding these games in extremely high regard. And I feel that's because Nintendo always saw these games as lesser to the big budget titles, as while I may kiss the very ground that Wario Land 3 decides to walk on, this is not a common sentiment.
Thank God.
Do not act like you are any better than him.
Whatever could he mean by that?
The GBA skipped out on its chance to house an original 2D Mario title, while instead putting out remakes of the SNES and NES games. And they were good, but didn't replace the oddly square-shaped hole inside my heart.
I should probably get that checked out.
But then came the DS, my grandpa's favorite console, and his favorite game on it? Let's just hope he likes Othello. The DS was positioned as a console that everyone could enjoy, with an absolute filth of casual titles. There were so many of them, and they pushed the DS into being one of the greatest selling consoles of all time. But what if I told you things weren't always this way? What if I told you Metroid Prime Hunters and Grandpa's priorities have shifted? The DS did not initially have this mission statement, and although it eventually found its footing, it took a bit of a shift for them to realize what worked and what didn't. And out of that shift came one of the most revolutionary games in Mario's entire pantheon. What? That? Yeah, New Super Mario Bros. Despite what's said about it today, it was quite novel for the time, and critics and fans felt that this would be a classic to be held in the highest regard for generations to come. So what happened? Well, I quite like New Super Mario Bros. Because even though the areas were rather uninspired and the game lacked a sense of overall direction, it honestly doesn't feel like it needed those things for what the game was purposed to be. It was meant to be a simple return to form after 14 years of the style of Mario games living in the Sahara Desert, and for that, it was more than perfect. It translated those old classics into a new classic that took on its own art style, level design, and joyous feel. It feels like a game that was tailor-made for the time in which it was released in 2006. People needed to realize that there was more to life than Mario and the existence of the third axis.
Because sources have indicated there's even a fourth.
And it worked. Just maybe a little too well. See, if this was a little one-off kind of deal, people would likely be hailing this game as a classic, because even though I don't think it's as masterful or original as something like Super Mario World, it could very well have been known in the same vein as Super Mario Bros. 3. New Super Mario Bros. Had its problems, yes, but none of them were incredibly detrimental to the overall experience.
This was, though.
I ought to pull all that hair out from your head for giving me such a thought, you rotten son of a... They just kept on making the same game over and over again. I genuinely want someone to tell me the difference between New Super Mario Bros. Wii and New Super Mario Bros. U, because I'm just now realizing both of these clips are from New Super Mario Bros. Wii. And this was all within such a short time span. The franchise was becoming very stale very quickly. People found New Super Mario Bros. Wii rather inoffensive, enjoyable even. New Super Mario Bros. 2 tipped people over the edge, given that I don't know how to describe it. It was just New Super Mario Bros. 2. And then when New Super Mario Bros. U released, look who's pissed! None of them were bad games, and people seem to be fond of Wii especially, for some reason. But they didn't feel nearly as substantial as 2D Mario games once did. It didn't really feel like any of them gave me a reason to care, unlike all of the old 2D Mario games, which gave me more than a good reason to shut down the school so I could spend time playing it.
Don't ask how.
And what's worse is that the kind of bland and unoriginal style that dragged these games through the mud affected other facets of the Mario franchise as well. The 3D Mario games took a nosedive in any sense of creativity, because who would want to have a really cool vision for a game game that leads to it being looked at as a monumental classic when you could have the most generic title for a game ever? This doesn't count. But that's not even counting the spin-offs. The Paper Mario series was massacred, and it truly hasn't ever recovered from it. Yeah, and the Mario sports games gave me the new hobby of being a gravedigger. This didn't do any favors for Nintendo, especially during the Wii U era, where it desperately needed a killer app. Because A, Breath of the Wild wouldn't release until 2017, where most people would just end up buying it on the Switch anyway, and B, Game & Mario was not going to cut it, for most people. Speaking of the Switch though, this is where Nintendo started to shift their tune around a little. They were willing to get a bit more experimental with their titles, which is no more evident than with Super Mario Odyssey. This game was a wonderful blend of what we love about modern gaming, as well as what we once loved about the 3D Mario games of yesteryear. And ever since then, Mario has had quite a smooth ride through his rehabilitation.
There's a word I'm looking for here. Oh! Yes, I am a liar.
New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, Super Mario Party, Paper Mario The Origami King, and practically all of the sports titles had a heaping dose of what I like to call stupid. Some of these games were improvements compared to what we had gotten in the past, but keep in mind that bar was set by games like Mario Party 10, Mario Tennis Ultra Smash, and Paper Mario Sticker Star, which I found can't be described using any of the words in a dictionary. And I figured that that would be the end of it, that we would once again have to stumble into a line of mediocrity. But then, in the 7th year of the Switch's life, something miraculous happened. A brand new 2D Mario game got announced, and it doesn't look like the new Super Mario Bros. Games. This was amazing.
This was awful. I made it my entire life to keep Mario in such a fine and precise rigor, and this just throws it all away. But why would you want to keep having such sterile and lifeless experiences? They weren't lifeless. Yes, they bent on the same formula, but that was to keep it from going in a direction that I didn't like. But what if that restriction is the only thing keeping it from growing into what the franchise needs it to be, which would please more and more people? Then so be it. I'd rather the sun rise on the same day for the rest of my life than for it to one day rise in the 24 hours that follow it to be absolutely abhorrent.
Fellas, save it for the next spirit. I don't get paid enough for this.
Do you even get paid at all? How are these ugly children even getting into my house in the first place?
You left your front door unlocked.
Are you gonna be the one that teaches us the good spirit of wonder as it is in the present?
Oh God, no. That's why he called you. That's also why we don't get paid.
So you don't know anything about Super Mario Bros. Wonder at all?
Well, at the very least, I know that it exists, and I keep it on me at all times for protection. Oh shoot! There he is!
The game released on October 20th, 2023, and critics and fans alike have applauded it as a masterpiece. I'm glad we applied the restraints, but one might ask, why? Well, to answer that question, it may or may not be wise to simply play the game and find out for ourselves. So let's get into this game. I'm getting tired of beating around the bush. We open up with an introduction that very eloquently sets up many of my expectations for the game going forward. You might only be walking forward, but it feels very reminiscent of a game like Super Mario Galaxy, where you'd walk around in this peaceful atmosphere before things start to go awry. This is the Flower Kingdom, and unlike in other games where they would simply pretend that this is a new place to explore while simultaneously keeping with the same bland style that makes everything nearly indistinguishable from the Mushroom Kingdom, they actually follow through with it here. The landscape is interesting and varied, the architecture is unique and distinctive, and Daisy is a playable character.
Wow, what's next?
Bowser's the bad guy. But I can still excuse that because at the very least, what he does here is pretty interesting. You see, this game isn't called Super Mario Bros. Wonder because I'm wondering where all of my money went. It's all because of the game's new gimmick, the Wonder Flower. And just to show the power of this gimmick, Bowser uses one of them to turn himself into a castle, with clever wordplay ensuing. And then he goes off on his merry way to wreak havoc across the land, and as per usual, we have to stop him. That's about all we get in terms of his story, and while admittedly, it isn't much, 2D Mario games have never had the most complex stories, and I'm honestly fine with that because unlike with other video games, I feel that 2D platformers make for safe, consumable content where you don't really have to think about what you're playing. If this was an RPG, I don't think any of this would work nearly as well. But as it is here, it's fine, I'll live.
He won't, though. though.
I should definitely give a shout out to the game's art style, mostly due to the fact that it's a bit different from what we're used to. Yes, this is still Mario and all of his, I'll say acquaintances. I don't know how well he and Yellow Toad know each other. But the characters look different just enough to the point where I'm scared and confused. The art direction itself takes a drastic turn in a number of areas that I can't exactly put into words, which is something that either speaks for the game's insanity or mine. The power-ups lead me to think it's more so the game, but I can't really tell anymore. Most of the power-ups in this game are incredibly unique and very much lean into the charm that this game seeks to exude from every corner. The fire flower is obviously the least interesting, but even though it doesn't have much going on, I'm glad that it's here to balance out the other ones. The drill is where we start to get a bit on the wacky side of things. You can dig into the ground, the ceiling, the Goomba's cranium, anything's fair game. I will say though, this probably is the item that I use the least, because while it is useful in terms of combat and platforming in a vertical manner, horizontally, it isn't all that useful. And it just so happens that for most of the game, you'll be traveling horizontally, so I am legally required to say that the bubble flower is much better. This item is far more efficient at actually attacking enemies, and the bubbles can even act as a platform, so that's cute. Still doesn't mean I like it more than the elephant fruit though. This can turn Mario into an elephant, which is just about the stupidest thing ever, but I suppose that is this game's thing. And in terms of usefulness, this item gets a gold star because it's brutal towards enemies and useful in a good variety of circumstances.
But why an elephant? That's just stupid. Well, what would you rather have it be? Deceased?
So, you?
But surprisingly, that isn't where the game gets its weird factor from, as we're treated to even stranger stuff all throughout the game in the form of wonder effects. These effects make the game. If they didn't exist, it would be a fine game, but the levels would be feeling a bit lacking. And that's mostly because everything that these effects do is so integral to the gameplay. It's almost like they built the whole game around it or something. Some of them feel a bit half-baked, but because of how many of them there are, I don't think that I'm allowed to make any complaints.
I would disagree.
There is a wonder effect in every level of the game, so I would never be able to go over all of them, but I at least want to cover some of my favorites. The singing piranha plants are obviously a highlight, because while the first stage and its pipes coming alive was very cool, it was also plastered all over the marketing of this game, so when it happened in the first level, it was fun, but I wasn't all too surprised. But in the second level, this was not the case. When those plants started singing, I was taken aback, mostly because it was the first time I realized that in this game, expect the unexpected, which is a really fresh sentiment to go into a Mario game with, especially when in practically every game that came prior, all you could really do was try to unexpect the expected.
Oh wow, a grassy plains world. Oh wow, a grassy plains world. Oh wow, a grassy plains world.
The pole block is a treat though, with all of its verticality and acrobatics. It's not as important as something like the singing piranhas, but you'd find me dead before I say that it was anything less than immaculate. The Hoppy Cat transformation mixed with the zip track platforms made for a very fun and fast-paced level, as I already liked the Hoppy Cat transformation, and I also liked the zip tracks, so this was perfect. Not as the last level of the world though. But I'll get to my complaints later. I want to keep this guy on his toes. The Goomba transformation is really fun though. It has this whole setup all throughout the level, with everything around you getting absolutely decimated by all the Maw-Maws, which are really only in this stage by the way. So when you suddenly become their very diet and you have to sneak around through the bushes, the game turns into a stealth mission of sorts, which is very different from the rest of the game, where you'll often be rushing to the finish the whole time. The change of pace is very much appreciated, even if it's just for a short period of time. The dragon that appeared near the end of the Deep Magma Bog made me feel cooler than anything I've experienced in these past few years.
Probably because the AC has been down since 2019, and this is Florida.
And the return of the singing piranha plants was a delight after getting through so much of the game, with this appearance perhaps being even better than their first. But there are also wonder effects like invincibility, invisible platforms, the Puffy Lift transformation, and you know, there aren't all too many uninteresting wonder effects. Unlike the badges!
Oh no, not the badges.
I knew this game sucked.
There are badges in this game which are capable of a good variety of things. Wait, no, scratch that. A bad variety of things. Half of these abilities are almost completely useless to anyone over the age of 3, or 4 if you were that kind of kid. Most of them aren't there to make any fun additions to your gameplay, but the ones that do, I'd never use. All of the quote-unquote expert badges are literally designed to hinder your gameplay. Why would you want that? Ah, yes, now I understand the meaning of masochism. And the boost badges are just flat out useless in most cases compared to the action badges. I honestly don't know why they exist unless you really wanted to. The action badges are where it's at, but while it does make the option available to switch things up every now and then, I found that most people just stick to one of these badges for most of the game. There is very little reason to actually want to experiment. Unlike with the badges in something like Paper Mario, I don't feel like each of them change the gameplay up enough or serve enough of a purpose to warrant their existence. I do understand what they were trying to do here with giving the player so many options, but whereas the rest of the game tends to put all of these unexpected twists on just about every facet of the gameplay, the badges are either incredibly uninteresting or quirky to a fault. It doesn't ruin the game by any means whatsoever, but despite it being such a large and integral piece of the game, it feels like not much more than an afterthought.
Wait, does this game actually suck?
I tried telling you. No, this is one of the greatest Mario games ever made. It's just a few little things hold it back, especially when considering all the good stuff. Replace greatest with worst, few with lots of, and good for atrocious, and I might start to agree with you.
Back onto the things I actually like about this game, the world map. It's a nice change of pace. It isn't incredible, but just being able to walk around and explore such varied locations, even in this linear manner, is quite pleasant. But where would the world map be without all the levels on them, asked no one ever.
Oh boy.
Because even outside of all the gimmicks and craziness that this game throws at you around every corner, the levels themselves are presented with so much variety. They consist of such different architecture, enemies, theming, mood, scale, and just about everything in between. And mind you, this is all within a single area. I can't even begin to comprehend the amount of work that went into filling every one of these stages with such life and confidence. If I have any complaints about them, it's that they're almost too unique, meaning that some of the best gimmicks and level quirks never see the light of day after their introductory levels. But I'd rather be left wanting more than to be utterly burnt out by a lack of interesting ideas. Case in point, the bosses. What bosses?
No, like, seriously, where are they?
With all of this game's charm, uniqueness, creativity, and passion, the game's bosses received none of that. This is without a doubt my biggest gripe with the game.
I thought we were supposed to be teaching him why this game is good.
That doesn't mean I can't count my losses when they make themselves so utterly painful.
All of the bosses in this game are just Bowser Jr. with a different coat of paint. And even that's putting it lightly. They are all nearly the same boss fight. And while none of them are poorly designed, and they sometimes make fine uses of the Wonder Effects gimmick, they all consistently disappoint me on almost every level. I love Bowser Jr., but enough is enough! Well, they must have heard that, because some areas don't even have bosses. Come on! You know that's not what I meant! Worlds 3 and 5 just end out of seemingly nowhere, and it makes these portions of the game feel more unfinished than they already are. They just end with typical levels that claim to be the be-all, end-all of that world, and I'm sorry, but they honestly just feel like normal levels to me. It almost seems like having these worlds go on existing without bosses was never in the cards, but they simply ran out of time to make this game everything it wanted to be. I'd almost prefer it if Bowser Jr. was the boss for every single world, so there would at least be some consistency, but no! Have a stupid-looking NPC blocker progression for the game just because I'm not worthy enough. What kind of sense does that make? The first time this happened, I thought it was going to be a fake out where the rest of the world opens up, because World 3 is by far the shortest world, and it's no wonder why half of the whole point is missing. The story is already so loosely drawn together through the royal seeds or whatever they're called, and now this guy just goes, sorry. Even though Bowser is causing unspeakable suffering to all the residents of the kingdom, and I already know very well that the Prince Florian traveling with you is the ruler of the kingdom, but I'm gonna be all coy and act like your worthiness is the problem here! At the very least, the contrivance in World 5 made sense and showed you how these guys were actually helping you by going off to look for the royal seed on their own, but no! Have this guy be the most stuck-up NPC in any Mario game by acting like Mario isn't worth anything until he makes it to the top of the falls. Which just wastes time because of how insignificant and shallow this world is. It looks pretty, the world is gorgeous, the levels are good, but it's over before you know it. And while I feel like that decision should have been for the best given that I wanted this to be over as quickly as possible, it somehow makes everything so much worse because they didn't even have a shred of confidence to follow through with balancing out the content between worlds. Which is why the first world was so absolutely bloated with content, making it look like this is going to be a much larger experience than it actually was. Just for World 3 to go and ruin my dinner, and we haven't even talked about the airship bosses. You walk forward, press a button, and that's the boss. There is nothing to it. I just want there to be something substantial about the bosses, or let alone have them attached to a single ounce of the creativity that this game constantly pumps out. But instead, we are stuck with this lifeless corpse of a lineup.
Even I didn't think it was that bad. Let's get back on track.
Speaking of track, the progression system that this game follows is interesting. Among other things. The first 3 worlds are set in a linear order. I can't procrastinate the 3rd world like I dreamed that I could. But the 4th, 5th, and 6th worlds can be tackled in any order provided that you go through enough of the pedal aisles, which connects all of the worlds in its own ways. The only world that doesn't obey the rules in this regard is the special world, which all of the worlds connect to given that you can find the way to get there. Every stage here is built to be as challenging as possible, with 5 stars of difficulty burdening each of them. Sort of. See, this might just be a me thing, but this game is incredibly easy. The only time I ever even got close to struggling was on the final level. These stars don't mean squat. And you know what else doesn't matter? The story. I know I briefly touched on this earlier, and you might recall that I said the story doesn't really matter in a Mario game. Except for this one, apparently. Bowser keeps hyping up this big wonder throughout the game, like it's gonna be this huge thing. And the final area really builds up to it with some absolutely incredible levels that made me greatly anticipate whatever would happen next. But why do something new when you can do something old, stupid, and recycled? Because after you make your way through a gauntlet of wonders, tricks, and gimmicks, during the final boss it is revealed that Bowser seeks to enslave the whole universe with rhythm. That's stupid. And the boss fight itself, oh come on, this is just Tiki Tong all over again. You beat him, the game ends.
You know, I'm with him on this one. This game does stink.
Oh man, that means I'm gonna have to call him.
Who are you supposed to be?
Oh boy, I can't wait for this year's new Mario game. Hopefully it's better than last year's stupid Mario Wonder game.
Mario Wonder? More like Mario Blunder.
Yeah. I just like how newer superior Mario Brethren Deluxe plus Grassy Plains Stage 94 innovates on last year's by adding more grassy plains.
There can never be enough.
What's going on? I think this is what will happen if we keep pursuing the claim that Mario Wonder is a bad game. I wanted Mario to not grow beyond the boundaries it shouldn't break, but as a result, I don't think it's broken through any boundaries at all. I might not have cared for all your long-winded ramblings, but if there's one thing I've understood from all of it, it's that Mario still has a reason to exist, but it has to give itself that reason through innovating on what's necessary. I don't think it matters if you prefer the series to stay grounded or shoot for the stars, as long as it's allowed to be a series rather than a continuous set of entries. I don't know why it took me so long to see it, but I understand now. From now on, I'm gonna be a better man. From now on... What did you do to them? Wait, no, I can change. I can... Whoa, what a trip. What happened to him?
Oh, he bled out while you're gone. I think he might be dead.
Nah, he'll be fine.
Super Mario Bros. Wonder is not a perfect game by any means, with the bosses especially needing some ironing out. But everything outside of that is filled with such life and creativity, which is something that's been foreign to 2D Mario games since, I would say, Super Mario Land 2. With every new wonder effect, enemy, or stage theme this game introduces, it makes an effort to bring back the joy that Mario was once all about. It doesn't matter that it isn't perfect and that its story and bosses fell flat, because the rest of the game seeks to accomplish something greater than that. It was built to be the wackiest, most fun-filled 2D Mario game ever, and they accomplished that really well, and I won't let a few gripes I had with it destroy the fun that I did have with it. This really is one of the best overall games of the year.
Oh my goodness. What have I been doing?
Not playing Mario Wonder?
Yeah, exactly. I know what I need to do. Thanks, guys. This has really been the best Christmas ever.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. I just got evicted.
It sounds like you need a bit more Mario Wonder in your life.
You know, you're right. I shouldn't. Oops.
Well, seeing as I got nothing better to do, it's time to fall back on my addiction. Because it's only natural. It's July.